All right. Uh, Welcome to Big Book Compendium. I'm Steve Wood, recovered alcoholic. So, when we're, a lot of us have been around a lot of meetings, and meetings, people, like to say, I'm going to talk about what it was like and what happened and what it's like now. It's not what it says in the book. It says what we were like, what happens, we're like now. So I share a meeting. I need to talk what I was like at the beginning. Let's look at what I was like. And I could tell you right away, I got resentment and sought revenge. I got mad and assaulted other people. And I got angry and punched the wall, kick a person's car, stab people in the back. I did all that stuff, and I told the person off to feel better. That's what I was like. I gossiped, I judged, drama. That was a liar, a cheat, and a thief. I can tell you that. And that's what I was like. Is that the legacy that we want? The legacy we want is best said by a Buddhist writer named Jack Kornfield, and some of you have heard this before. He says, in the end, only three things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how deeply you let go. So that is a journey we need to be on. And we resented and harmed others. We need to learn to love. And it's not something you actually learn, it's something you become. And we lived in fear. We need to live life gently. And that's the thing. And, we held on to so much stuff. We just need to let go, to learn to let go. And I said this before, hypothetically, if this is what I'm holding on to, right? And this is something that represents something new, right? I can't take the new one until I put down the old one. And now I can have what I need. So a lot of us hold on to these things so tight, and we need to make right for our past. And we 4 through 9 accomplishes what I'm just talking about. It helps us put down the old. It's like if I'm carrying a bunch of stuff, let's say a bunch of books or a bunch of boxes, and Kicken comes up to me and says, give me a hug. I'm like, how can I do that? I need to put down everything. And that's what we're talking about here. And so I guess what I'm saying is we need to unlearn the way we lived our life. And when we walk into the light, we're also taking our first step out of darkness into the unknown. And when we proceed to the unknown, we learn a new meaning of the word understanding. And understanding simply means we get what you see, you comprehend it. Maybe the first time in your life. And the sum of your life is simply your understanding of life. And step 4 is about gaining that understanding. So when we become spiritually awoke, we begin a new life and a new way to live. And steps 4 and 5 is where that new life begins. And within those steps, we gain awareness, what drives us. So we need to get clearer perception of our personality, our identity, and character. Some of us have never known that before. Some of these words we never even knew. And that's why it's important with book studies, give definitions and give people an understanding, make them study what character means. I didn't know, I heard the words, I didn't know what they meant. But this new awareness allows me to truly understand myself and most of all, other people. In other words, we discover who we truly are. We're not looking back at yesterday's disappointments and failures and stuff. We look back at, today's, we look back so we can let go of the broken pieces that we can't put back together. So until we become aware of what drives our thoughts, we'll always be at the mercy of them. And we have difficulty with the direction of our life because these instincts rule it. We learned that last week pretty good. And forever it keeps me in the bondage of self. And I said this last week. I said, people don't like inventory because they think it's the unknown. It's not the unknown, it's the known that they're afraid of. It's the known. Think about that for a second. We know all this stuff we're putting down on paper. We know it. Let's go to page 65. So the big book is loaded with promises, directions, and conditions. And a condition is like a prerequisite before taking, it's not called requirement to achieve something. And this paragraph has very important conditions. Here's one. We went back through our lives. So how far did we go? You know, we go back as far as we can, as far as you can remember. Like guys will tell me, would you like to write down the little girl in the red dress in the schoolyard that, you know, that used to throw rocks at me? I say, well, why are you bringing him up? Her up, you know? My thing about going back deep was I had sponsors when I never did a 4-step, but I've had it somewhat broken down to me. And I remember one guy told me, you just write down your last, you know, few months of being out there. And I was like, I've heard that uttered behind me at meetings and stuff. And our lives does not look like that. It's our lives, right? And thank God my sponsor told me to go back as far as I can, because one incident happened to me, and I brought this up before, is I was violated as a child by a neighbor. And but by the time that I got sober, he was long dead. And I just didn't know what it was, if it was a resentment towards him, a fear of people finding out. So it was in both places. But when I put down the resentment, my sponsor immediately goes to me, and I held it out to the end, of course, to the inventory, because this is top secret stuff. I have to tell it out to the end. And actually, I didn't hold out to the end. As I went and I did my hour, and I was being rid, you know, my mind was spinning over this stuff I didn't tell anyone about. So I had to call him back and go do it. And I did it. And when I told him of this guy, he didn't ask me about the guy at all. He goes, what does your parents think? I said, well, they didn't believe me. And my sponsor, just like he always scratches his chin, and he goes, you know what? He goes, now we know why you always resented your parents. Because I told him I resented my parents for, I couldn't say how long. There was always something, because he kept saying, well, what triggered it? He was building up, you know, that's what the good sponsors do. And that's, if I hadn't gone all the way back, I would never have been past that. You know, a beautiful relationship with my parents today. Look what it says next. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. It's another condition. We mentioned the word thoroughness a lot. You know, no stone unturned, to look over, completely careful, you know, missing no details. Honesty is my favorite definition, is the awareness of where I'm at. The awareness of where I'm at. Do I have resentments? Do I have fear? How do I feel right now in this moment? Is the honesty. Self-honest, you know, people can recover if they're honest with themselves, right? That's what it is. So 3 important conditions for inventory is going back through our lives, thoroughness, honesty. And I'm going to fall back on last week with another condition, is we put it on paper. So 4 conditions for inventory that they've gone over so far is put it on paper, we go back through our lives, thoroughness and honesty. Those are important conditions for inventory. And the reason I believe why people wind up in trouble is they are not thorough and they're not honest with their inventory. And I can now, you know, hearing lots of 5th steps, I can pretty much tell when a person's thorough and honest. And I know I have chronic relapses as sponsees. You know, I don't fire people, you know, I let them come back. And, you know, they always say, I didn't tell you everything last time. Oh, I'm like, oh, really? Like, I know. I've had one guy who's relapsed dozens of times, and every time it's something I didn't tell you. It's crazy. But thoroughness is associated, you know, to our other powerful promise in the book, you know, is rarely seen a person fail to thoroughly follow their path. You know, I'm sorry. Yeah, rarely seen a person thoroughly follow their path. And that's thoroughly follow their path. And the other one we hear all the time for promises at meetings: if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we made from halfway. What's painstaking? Thoroughness, right? So that word's all over the place. Let's look at the next part. When we were finished, we considered carefully. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people really were often quite wrong. Look at this. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. Wow. On our best day, that's all we could do. That person made me angry. That person is wrong. That person, blame, 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 blame. Right. And the question is, can you make me mad? No, the only person that can make me angry is myself. The only person, the 12 and 12 on page 90 states, it is a spiritual axiom that every time we are disturbed, no matter what the cause that would be calling to, there is something wrong with us. No matter what the cause, there's something wrong with us. No matter what the person did, there's something wrong with us. That's a very important point. Not sometimes, not a few times, every time. And that's what we discover. And we discover that in the third column of the inventory. And of course, the end result of that, selfishness that we live in, is a result of that. And the only thing, I'll tell you this right now, what I discovered, it took me like 3 years or longer to discover it, was the only thing that could possibly be wrong with anything or anybody in this entire universe is my thinking, right? It's my thinking. And when we do sets 4 and 5, we see the spiritual truth in that statement. And the essence of living the spiritual life is when we can stop blaming others. And this season, I believe from my experience in ceasing blaming others is the key to enlightenment. I mean, think about that. You're hearing a person's fifth step, and it's you, and this person. But once you do this and point back at yourself, the light bulb goes off. It starts to light up a little bit. Let's see, back to the book. The usual outcome was that people continue to wrong us and we stayed sore, stayed angry, right? Call that resentment. Sometimes it was remorse. Then we're sore ourselves. And now we're in a darker world. Sore ourselves would be self-pity. Very ugly, dark place. We resent so many people. The only person left to resent is us. Us. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. I love this line. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived, like 16 seconds. Look at the wars that happened in the world in the past 40 years, whatever. There's a lot of them. What victory is there? And there was, it was political. It was a show. So even World War II, I mean, we celebrated for a week and it's back to business. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. So last week we talked about resentment. Now we're going to talk about harm inventory. And people will say there is no harm inventory. It's not in the book. Now, I was brought up with sponsors and grand sponsors, and they go all the way back to the Cleveland area. And even before Joe and Charlie came about in the 80s, where they put harms in other sects, and then eventually they separated harms. The sponsor I'm from was doing harm inventory, so it might be different, slightly different, but it's be open-minded and look into it. What I'm going to say. So, and I've sponsored a lot of guys who come from their sponsors, and when they do a harm inventory, they get it, like why it's important. So, I think it's not there because it's kind of obvious. I mean, it's so obvious, we need it. And the real question is, why wouldn't we want to do it? And unless you never harmed anybody, right? But the real question is, how free do you want to be? And how much further do you want to go? That type of stuff. And the big difference, or some of the difference between harm inventory and resentment, of course, we know resentment is a thought. Harm is an action. But the huge difference between the two falls in the instincts again, the misdirected instincts. So my pride and self-esteem, emotional security and sex instincts, when I have a resentment, those instincts are hurt or threatened. That's why I'm building up. And when I harm someone, I'm satisfying those instincts. I can make them feel better. I can make my pride feel better and my personal relations feel better, all that stuff. Meaning resentments either stay in our mind or we satisfy them with conflict, physical conflict. So if I stay selfish long enough, I will eventually become self-seeking. And self-seeking is selfishness in action, acting out on selfish thinking. So self-seeking is just another word for harm. So selfishness means tending mostly my own needs, low and not thought of others. Self-seeking would be taking action on those needs, on my thinking, which can't be good. In other words, harming others will, you know, I believe from my experience, it says self-seeking will slip away in this book. Beautiful promise. Harming will slip away. I don't think there's anyone in here that harms people the same way sober they did when they were out there, especially when you start doing step 10. You know, but it goes way back again through our lives. You know, harming others slips away. It sounds, impossible for a person driven by self-will, controlled by anger. But I can honestly tell you, without doing harm inventory, the miracle for me could not be possible in certain areas. So harm means to cause physical or mental damage to another person. That's scary. And it can be deliberately or not deliberately inflicted, right? Kind of like the resentments are fancied or real. And a little bit different here. When deliberately, it's an act of revenge, blame and revenge. I'm going to go get revenge from resentment. When not deliberate, it means a person just got caught in our path of destruction, caught in our crossfire. Maybe we robbed someone or stole money from someone we don't know. Or maybe we're in the wrong place at the wrong time. And they got, of course, injured. DUI, stuff like that. We'll get more into that. We read this already out of the 12 and 12 before. We're going to read it again. And it's page 80 of the 12 and 12. If you don't have one, it's no big deal. But it says, page 80. It says, we might ask ourselves what we mean when we say we have harmed other people. What kind of harms do people do to one another anyway? To define the word harm in a practical way, we might call it the result of instincts in collision. We talked about that with the actor. Everyone is in collision, which cause physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual damage to people. That's a lot. If our tempers are constantly bad, we arouse anger in others. Then they come back and step on our toes and we're mad at them. Something we started. That's the instincts in collision. If we lie, cheat, we deprive others not only of their worldly goods, but of their emotional security and peace of mind. I robbed my mom of emotional security every night when I was out there messing around. We really issue them an invitation to become contentious and vengeful. If our sex conduct is selfish, we may excite jealousy, misery, and a strong desire to retaliate in kind. So let's look at some harms. Let's go to page 18. Let's look at some harms. We've gone this before, and we're kind of cruise to this today again. We went to this early on in this book study, and there's a lot of new people in here. So page 18, it says an illness of this sort, and we have come to believe it as an illness, involves those about us in no way other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him. No one is angry or hurt, but not so with the alcoholic illness, for it goes alienation of all things worthwhile in life. Annihilation of all things worthwhile. And so annihilate means to destroy, maybe, in large numbers. Annihilation. How many things were annihilated in your life? How many times did you harm a person but harm numerous people at the same time? And this sums it up right here. It means consumes and engulfs all life you have to suffer. So this is a very indication that we have caused harm to others. Our harms, go from one life to the next. Newcomers say the only person I ever harmed is myself. Really? There are so many excuses people come up for a lack of inventory. This is where excuses end. It has to end here. And the thing is I did the circles of engulfment earlier in this group, and what it was like I had a domestic situation, and this girl and I were fighting, and my friends tried to break it up and I fought with them, and then someone else witnessed it and the cops came and I fought with them, and our parents got called, so they got harmed. I harmed like 14 people in the course of 15 minutes. That's what I mean. We don't look at it that way. You know, it has to go deep. And look at it, says it brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment. Fierce means violent. Violent resentment is what they're saying here. That sounds like an action of resentment. You know, it sounds like a harm. You know, look what it says: financial insecurity. One of the biggest driving forces of resentment, harm, and fear. If my mind is wrapped on material security, we call pocketbooking here, my mind is very discontent, short, angry mindset, and I'll harm people on the side. What I mean by that is, stop, I'm busy, get away from me, type of thing. You know, I say harmful things, and you know, what if my financial security is really bad? I become dishonest and steal, right? Disgusted friends and employers. Disgusted means strong disapproval. Did your friends and, you know, family, you know, disapprove of your actions leading to resentment before or after harm? You know, we hurt lots of people, lots of them. Warped lives of blameless children. Are you the product of an alcoholic home? Were you one of the blameless children? Did you ever say, I'll never do that to my kids? I will never treat my children that way. I will never do that. And then it happens. What disgusts me is when the alcoholics act like they're the victims. Our children are the innocent victims. And some of us have harmed our kids so bad, it might take years to fully have the full amends we have. And it might take years, baby steps. But I've seen it happen, beautiful stories and beautiful things. Sad wives. All I think about here in sad wives is cheating, lying, stealing, deceiving. It's called dishonesty. The act of lying, cheating, stealing, deceiving, right? And that's the craziness of it. You know, we all cheated, we all lied, we all deceived people at some point, whether it's through sex or it's just through friends. You know, we cause physical and mental harm to people, you know, but we say we never harmed anyone. You know, or I'm not making amends to her. She cheated on me, blah, blah, blah. So parents, it says on here, remember, like the look on your mom's face or your father's face or your older brother's face, you know, the disgust. And then, like I said earlier, robbing my mom of her emotional security at night. And I didn't realize that until I made amends to her. And she says, I'm just glad that I'm not getting a call at 3 o'clock in the morning. They're scraping off the sleep and I can sleep now. And I went, oh man, you know, up all night wondering where I'm at. We don't take that in consideration because we don't care. When we have an obsession, the obsession doesn't care. You know, one of the greatest gifts we have is the opportunity to make amends. It says, anyone can increase the list. We hope this volume will inform and comfort those who are or may be afflicted. Doesn't say a few. And this paragraph shows me the destructionists I caused. And I have some big rebuilding to do. So the other thing about the reason we inventory harms is harming leads to guilt. And guilt is a very deep, powerful emotion of shame felt from committing a past action. And it builds slowly and deeper and deeper. Even worse when people pass away that we never got to make amends to. But it's this guilt is dwelling on the past and disrupts our present. And guilt and resentment are similar. They both block us from the spirit within, right? They are both one of the common manifestations of self, right, that we talked about. And they keep us in the past. But there's one big difference between guilt and resentment. Is guilt, we know who's at fault. We know we're at fault. Guilt already turned the blame on ourselves. And we know the term, it's eating me up inside, guilt. And guilt leads to remorse, regret, shame, that self-loathing, and most importantly, low self-esteem, self-pity and misery, and even worse, depression. All that stuff leads there. And guilt tries to convince you that nothing can be done about it, that it's too late. Too much time has passed. The damages have been done. You can't fix it. Go feel better with a drink. So guilt is not necessarily a response to one's past actions. It's a present moment restriction that we bring the past into our present. Where do we connect to God? In the present. I cannot connect my mind if I'm stuck in the past. And no amount of guilt can ever undo the past. So guilt can have two outcomes. It can drown you until you're useless, or it can push you to fix it. And to achieve freedom, we must get past guilt. We must look at our harms and discuss it with another. We must look at six and let this stuff go, the guilt, and go make amends for more of the racing of the guilt, right? And it's also the forgiveness of others. Making amends not only clears away guilt, it clears away remorse and the shame and the self-loathing and the depression, all that stuff I mentioned. So if you're full of guilt, it's time to take action. You see why it's a good idea to do harm inventory, all that stuff. I'm going to put up the harm inventory sheet. It looks just like the resentment sheet we did last week. If you haven't seen this yet, maybe you want to go back and watch the last 2 weeks of on the Big Book Compendium on YouTube, and you'll find this one where we did introduction to inventory and the inventory packet and the resentment inventory. So it looks just like this one, and it's you put down who you harmed, what you did, and what drove me, not necessarily affected me, what drove me to the harm, what took me there. Its essential instincts are all there, the same ones that are listed in the Big Book. And then here we have dishonesty, self-seeking, fright, and we'll get to that in a minute. But like I said last time, if the inventory stopped with column 1 and 2, all we have is a simple confession. Oops, the third column right here, which call the effects mire, whatever you want to call it. This tells me my story, and it goes deeper. This is all about me. This is the part I need to understand, and then I'll understand, and then I'll see that I was dishonest, self-seeking. If I just jump from here to dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened, it's my sponsor telling me on that. I need to see it for myself, and if I can see these things for what they are, it takes a while. It takes a good fifth step to do. It takes a good more inventory to do. Sometimes it takes a few years to truly get it, but I see the misdirected instincts for what they are. And you can't have two cores. You can't have the spirit within you and misdirected instinct, because they're in the same place. The difference is the misdirected instincts store everything inside of you that blocks you from that core of spirit. So let's look at these real quick. If my desire for personal relationships is too great, it may cause me to hurt another human being, right? If I live in pride, what others think of me, I become jealous, right? Somewhere. If I have high self-esteem, I might be, patronizing and condescending because I think I'm better than you. If I have low self-esteem, it might cause me to prove myself because I think I'm less than. And emotional security will cause me to have those outbursts of rage. If there's something my material instinct must, then it might get me to get that at all costs, run over whoever I get to. We've all done that, especially the ones in here that did the dope. We're going to run over what we need and how we're going to get it. And that's what we do. That's all we do. We do the alcohol too, but my desire for like sex instinct may cause me to be dishonest. So that's a harm. So we're going to do example of Mr. Brown. Remember, his attention to my wife was a resentment. Let's do a flip of that. So what do? Mr. Brown is attention to my wife. And we mentioned last week, could be fancy to real. It could be actually he's looking at my wife and talking to her, or Mr. Brown's waving in the same direction as my wife, and my wife's he's not even waving to my wife, but he must be. Either one, it's a resentment, attention to my wife. So let's hypothetically make up a story here that Mr. Brown, Mr. X, whoever it is, I guess it's Bill, I don't know, walks up and punches Mr. Brown in the nose, breaks his nose. So who did it harm? Mr. Brown broke his nose. Did it affect his personal relations with Brown? That's what drove the whole thing. High self-esteem drove it, right? He thinks he's better than Mr. Brown right away. That's why he's going to go feel. He wants to feel, he's going to feel better. And then everyone else in the room saw it. So I better go prove myself. Pride. Folks, his pride's affected. Emotional security is already in rage. It's already flying forward, right? There's no material, there's no sex involved with those two. But look at the ambitions. Maybe at one point, these two guys were friends or just working partners or said hello to each other. The socials, the ambitions, the social's been affected, and the security's been affected. Every time I see him in the future, I'm going to snarl. There's that guy again, which probably be more harms. I wouldn't say I was dishonest with Brown because I didn't lie to him about anything, but I was self-seeking and I was frightened, right? I was frightened, you know. And another way you can look at these, and it's not that difficult. And some people only have a few things to write down harms. Sometimes some have a lot. But like I said, I've had guys come to me and said, I never did a harm inventory. Let me try it. And all of a sudden they're like, holy crap, you know? And another way to look at it is column 1 could be who did I injure? Column 2 could be what was injury I caused? Column 3 could be what was I trying to satisfy? What instinct was I trying to satisfy? And the 4th column be what's the end result of the injury? So we were at page 67 last week, right? And page 67 had some interesting things. We're not going to break it down again, but it told us to put out of our minds the wrongs others had done. Let's look at this from resentment, right? So they're asking us to put out of the minds the wrongs others had done and disregard the other person's involvement entirely, right? Where were we to blame? So if I'm disregarding the first 2 columns, I'm looking right here. I'm looking at my instincts and I'm going to see where I'm to blame. The same thing with this resentment. The harm. I'm going to look at these and instantly I'm going to go, yeah, now I see I was self-seeking. Now I see how pride made me go, I better go prove myself. I'm going to look like a wimp, you know? And that's what it does. I see how self-seeking, took me over, how high and low self-esteem made it all about me. High self-esteem and low self-esteem made me in fear. So I better go to do something about it. All that stuff. It's you. It's how you are, right? The 4th column in the end result, it's the end result of it. I'll give you an example of one of mine. I don't want to get into details, too much, but like my father and I remember just us getting into a fight. I don't want to get into details on here because, my dad's still alive and he doesn't care, but I don't want to go too deep on it. But we got in a fight and it was years of building it up, but it destroyed our personal relations, and I was trying, my self-esteem was high. I was driven by self-esteem to do what I did. I'm, screw this guy. I was, completely insane by this time in my life. And my pride, I had people in my ear telling me, don't let your dad talk to you that way. You can't do that. And emotional security, social security. And then my whole, with him, it was self-seeking and frightened. As far as like the places I stole from, I used to go into Safeways, which is a grocery store here in America, if you're in another country, but I used to go in there and steal. None of us ever stole, did we? But who did I harm? That store, Did it affect my personal relations with that? Of course it did. I stole from there. I don't know if my self-esteem was high or low. I don't know. I don't think it was really affected by it. Pride, I didn't really care what other people thought. I just did it. But my emotional security was definitely affected because I felt weird after I did it. So maybe pride too, but material security. But it definitely affected all 3 of these ambitions, right? And I was dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened. And I did make amends for those. And as far as gathering harms go, this is a great way to do it, is write out the ones that bother you the most, the guilty ones. And once you've done that, take out your resentment sheets and see what resentments you took action on. And if so I resented my mom because she talked to me a certain way. And you go, oh yeah, I remember what I said to her after that. Over to the harm sheet. So resentments you took action on. Also, Look at it reverse. Look at your harms and go, did I have a resentment before that? Oh yeah, and they moved out of resentments now. So that's a different way to look at it. And, I have those very hard-headed sponsees. Like I said, they believe that they never harmed anyone, and they tell me the only person I ever harmed is me. Here's a way to go deeper. I'm going to put up this primer. So I talked about these primers last time. Let me zoom this one in a little bit. So this one is where I came with myself. I don't like the prompt sheets they have all over the internet where it tells you what your resentments might be or your harms might be. And people go, oh, that's me, that's me, that's me. And they put a bunch of down that don't matter. This is a fishing exercise. It's not inventory. It's not step work. It's to help you with your 4-step for harms and sex conduct. And so you basically, I've broken down dishonesty, the act of lying, cheating, stealing, deceiving, right? So, lying, inability to tell the truth. I write down all the people I lied to. Now I can't remember all the people I lied to, but you think of the biggest ones, right? The biggest ones. All the people you cheated on. Now that could be in a relationship in a sexual manner, or that could be cheating out of cards, out of money, all that stuff, right? All that stuff. Cheating is unethical, disloyal methods to get something we want. And people cheat in competitive situations. And then you also have, of course, cheating people out of money. Deceiving is a big one. People don't understand what that word really means. It means to mislead a person to gain personal advantage. What we call that the hustle that we did for so long. And you go, oh crap, and stealing, so I put down the people I deceived. Stealing, take another person's property with or without permission. With permission would be not returning the money that I borrowed from Stephen, right? Borrowing without permission would be taking the money off his dresser. You see what I'm saying? Is there a difference? There is no difference. There's no difference between the money you borrow from someone that return it and the money you stole off the dresser, right? There's no difference. It's all stealing. Write down the people you stole from, places too. And some might fall under sex on some of these when you move them over to the sex inventory. We'll get more into that when we get there. But this is one of the main reasons, people do harm inventory, is because lying, cheating, deceiving, and stealing. These are beyond thoughts, they're actions, deep actions. Sure, they're people we resented, we lied to, we cheated on, right? Stole from. And then, like I mentioned earlier, plenty of the people we lied to, cheated, and stole from we had no resentment against. It just got caught in our crossfire. And how do you see, do you see why this is so important? You look at these, you see the importance of this inventory. If any of these, like I said, is about sex, move them over to there. And how many times you say, like, how many times do we say, why did I do the, why do I say the things I did? Why did I, do the things I do? Why did I say that? There's something in us that drives us to do that. And I'm going to put up another slide here. This is one of my favorites. Oops, I'm going to have to do it differently. Hold on. Give me 1 second. And you're going to say, what the heck is this? It's still not doing it right. One more time. Third time the charm. All right. You're like, what the heck is that? It's an archer, right? Surrounding him, this archer is a world of people. You can see that. You don't see them, but they're there. And you notice he's not just pulling back in the bow. He's cocked and ready in that bow. He's pulling hard. So the bow represents the mind, selfish, self-seeking insanity, right? The arrow he's pulling back on, the arrow represents physical harm. And you notice again, he's ready to fire that arrow. So what's his mindset? He's in deep resentment. And what happens is the archer gets that deep resentment and he pulls back on the bow and he's holding it for a long time in that resentment. We know that at some point we snap and he stands back and he goes, he's angry, very mad. And he finally pulls back. This guy's got to learn, boom, let it fly. This boom, let it fly. He pulls back on the arrow and lets it fly again and again and again, harms another and another and another, snapping. The big question is, who's really pulling the bow? The archer represents our misdirected instincts. Our archer is driven by pride, by self-esteem, by personal relations, by sex, sex relations, all that. When you ask your mind what the problem is, it never says, I'm glad you asked. Back when you were a child, it doesn't say that. It's, what does your mind tell you when you're angry? It says, go get the guy, go prove your point, go tell him you're wrong, yell at them, be right. And just like the archer, we want to point out, we point outside ourselves to fix the problem, right? Is this archer going anywhere inside himself? No, he's looking outside to fix a problem, right? I never once said to myself, my pride and sex relations was always, doing me wrong. No, blame and revenge, satisfy those instincts and feel better. The spirit must become the archer. So we can put down the bow, so we can be driven by love rather than hate, compassion rather than resentments. Think about it, patience rather than anger, peace rather than fear, all that stuff. You have that, know that humility other than pride. And rather than despair, have hope. And rather than greed, no selflessness. And instead of guilt, experience freedom, know freedom. Anything in life is from experience. And when we become aware of these instincts and that we're the archer, we start to see things differently. We finally put down the bow. Finally, what does your bow look like? How tight do you hold your bow? Sets 4 through 9 changes the way we look and talk to people. It's very important. Some people might say, screw people, I don't like anybody. Well, good luck, But what happens is what happens is we need to think what we say rather than say what we think. Stop trying to be right all the time. That type of stuff. Do you want to be right or do you want to be free? Stop trying to get the last word in. We do that well. And the greatest gifts we've always had, but we never use it, the pause button. We pause when agitated and doubtful. We need to learn that pause button. Before you think, pause. Before you say what you think, pause and walk away. It might sound crazy, but we can do that. Words are so important, but silence is sacred. That's what I've learned. And also I've learned this: before you open your mouth and speak, harmful words that you'll regret later, ask yourself these simple questions. We have to go talk to someone and you need to tell that person how you feel. Are my words true? Are my words going to be kind? And are my words necessary? Are my words true? Are they kind? Are they necessary? It's a great mindset to go into talking to anybody, right? Let's go to the bottom of 65. It says, we turn back to the list, for it held the key to the future. The key to the future. So a key is not like what we grab and open a door with, but what does a key do? Right? It's a means of access. It grants us entry somewhere. Step 4 is the key to the future. So does that mean if I don't do step 4, I have no future? All I can say this is, if you are an alcoholic, this is your best chance for long-term recovery, beating this illness, removing the obsession, 4 through 9. And then of course 10 and 10, 11, 12. Yet, A members call this the dreaded 4th step, probably because it brings up names of people they would rather forget about, keep hidden, locked away. It brings to light secrets. We're only as sick as our what? Secrets. But it rehashes events we would rather just not recall. And it frightens us for years to think what happened if someone knew about them. That's why we do harm inventory and fear inventory too. Because fear inventory, we'll talk about that next week, about how fear inventory, there's, fear of what others might know about me. Think about that one. And there, but in our mind, it definitely does not seem like this stuff's the key to the future. You have to do the work and experience it and keep going. Just like meditation, It works if we tried it for a while. Keep doing it. Remember the people around you that do this. Until you do that, all you have is a theory. Look what he says now. We pretend to look at it from an entirely different angle. If you look at something from a different angle, you're looking at it from another point of view, a different point of view, maybe for the first time in our life. My grant sponsor used to say, it's almost like we never realized we could turn our head left. That we're so narrow-minded. You know, when you see things from a different point of view, what does it do? It changes the way you perceive it. When I change the way I look at things, the things I look at change. Seeing it from a different angle. Here is what happens when we see things from a different angle. Look at this. We begin to see the world and its people were really dominated us. Wow. So we begin to see we are the creator of our problems. Our problems were of our own making. Meaning, like I said earlier, we stopped pointing the fingers and pointing at ourselves. And the most unique, I said this a few times, the most unique feature of anger is to insist that others are to blame. Think about that. Blinding us from seeing any truth, that we are to blame. We're the innocent victims of the wrongdoings of others. We need to stop blaming and not look at ourselves mistakes. And also being a victim, there's no recovery in being a victim at all. Look what it says next. In that state, the wrongdoings of others, fancied or real, have power to actually kill. Fancies, is driven from the word fantasy. It's something that is imaginary, not reality. Mr. Brown, waving, the person waving at Mr. Brown's wife is if it's imaginary, Here's a deep question we all need to ask. We've all asked. It kind of falls into the same thing of, like in the book, what can we do about it and all those questions? What do I have to do? How could we escape? How can I escape from the madness that is killing me, that I'm causing myself? We know the easy way out is to get loaded. We saw these resentments must be mastered, but how? We cannot wish them away any more than alcohol. Page 552 talks about praying away resentments. It's not a bad idea, but if I cannot wish them away, how can I pray them away? We must do inventory. We must let go. Go deep. This was a course. Now we get some deep stuff here. This was a course. We realized the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Now, again, you have to do the inventory to figure this out. This is what happens as a result of the inventory. Now, I know sponsors make a great mistake, and they tell, the guy's inventorying his ex-wife for a harm or resentment. Oh, don't worry about her. She's spiritually sick. Let's go to the next person. It's not her inventory. It's mine. I don't care if the person's batshit crazy. This is my inventory. I play a part in it somewhere, but that spiritual, they have a spiritual malady as well. They have an inability to connect with God. That's what we have to see. Once we see it in us, we see it in them. Though we did not like their symptoms, that would be our column 2, what they did to us and the way they disturbed us. Remember, instincts, hurt or threaten, column 3, right? So we don't like their symptoms, of what they did to us, and the way that they hurt us, which is hurting our instincts. They, like ourselves, were sick too. They, like ourselves, are selfish too. They, like ourselves, have pride too. They, like ourselves, have instincts and collision as well. Think of the people around you that are really sick and ask yourself, how hard is it to be that person? How hard was it to be you for a long time? I used to pick apart people in AA to my sponsor. He goes, how hard it is to be that person? The person that's in the meeting talking about their pain because they think that's the only way out. Drunk-a-log or whatever, just dumping the same stuff every day. I changed my perspective on that when my sponsor says, how hard it is to be, how hard it must be to be that person? Think about that. You start seeing that. We asked ourselves, this is a prayer. So we prayed. We asked God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person's offended, we say to ourselves, this is the anger prayer, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. Wow. It's an amazing prayer right there. This is a sick person. You know, I used to say to myself, thy will be done. I also would say, forgive them, Father. They don't know what they're doing. That was my little mantra I used to say. But here's a different way. We avoid retaliation or argument. Why? We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we restore our chances of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us if we let God, right? This whole thing is about letting God. It's in step 6 in the book. You're trying ready to let God remove these things. You got to let God, at least God will show us if we let him how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. Not letting God will be, I'll figure this out myself. Or I can't be nice to that person. But we know in our heart what's telling us. So if a person has dementia, let's just say, and forgets your name, do you get angry with them? If a friend's going through chemo and you meet for lunch once a week and he has to cancel the engagement because he's not feeling well, do you get angry with them? No, you treat them with compassion. And that sounds easy, those ones. It's an automatic feel. We must have tolerance and pity and patience towards all people, especially those who are spiritually sick. The same compassion we show towards everybody else. We'll be confronted by people who are cruel, who treat us wrongly in recovery. Some people in recovery and outside. It's a natural thing to happen. And what if we look at those people with similar compassion as the ill people? Cancer and this and that. Is it possible? I don't know if I can do that. It seems impossible. If a person's rude to you, can you have compassion for them? According to above, we can if we see them as spiritually sick. We become aware. Again, aware. Here's the thing. What I'm aware of in life, I can work on. Right? I can let go. But what I'm not aware of will control me. If I'm not aware I'm spiritually sick, it's always going to control me. If I'm aware of it, I can work on it, but I can see it outside myself as well. But the person but what if the person are not aware they're spiritually sick? We can't see them at all. We can't see it. It doesn't stand out like a broken bone. There is no medical diagnosis. Our response to them is what our instincts train us to do. React, harm, be rude. React back. Pride tells us to do that. Guy gets in my face, I'm going, what are you from, man? All that stuff. That's pride. I don't care how much God you think you have. There's no God and pride going on at the same time. You can't be dishonest and God reliant at the same time. But how can I have compassion for someone who's spiritually sick? The only way to gain compassion for someone who's spiritually sick is, and not kick their, we want to kick their butt. Is instead, how can I help them? How can I help this person? What can I say right now? We can't train ourselves to do that. That's the awakening. That's the awareness that grows in us. You say things like, whoa, what just happened there? That's a changed mindset that comes from doing inventory and discussing with another and letting go and making amends. From that, we come to the awareness of misdirected instincts and we see we're spiritually sick. In other words, we become aware that we're spiritually sick in ourselves and it affects the way we react to others with compassion. So that awareness comes even more irrelevant as we start making amends and doing 10, 11, 12, But the best way to experience compassion is by relating with what that person is going through. Deep, think of their instincts. Think of it. When I have compassion, you're putting yourselves in that person's shoes. It's not like empathy. Empathy, if I see a dope head and I just see a dope head, I did dope. Compassion is when you see the person's pain in their eyes and you may have seen it before the 4th step, but just looked at them as a person that's a dope head. But then all of a sudden you see the pain in their eyes and oh, that's instincts, that's resentment, that's compassion. That's the compassion you have. You start feeling it for them and you feel their pain sometimes. I'm going to close with a story. This is one of my favorite stories. This guy every morning goes to his grandmother's house for a cup of coffee and to receive her wisdom. And one morning he's out of his head. He's going everywhere. He's all over the place. And she realizes that anything she says is going one ear and out the other. It's not working. She takes a different angle and she puts 3 pots of water on the stove. The first one, she puts carrots in. The next one egg. And the third one, a pot of, in the pot, she throws some ground coffee beans in there. And once they become to boil, she puts the carrots in a bowl, the egg in another bowl, and she filters the ground coffee beans so it's just a cup of liquid. And she says, look, son, the carrot went in hard and strong, but faced with the obstacle of boiling water, they become soft and weak. The egg was soft inside, but when it faced the obstacle of the boiling water, it became hard inside. The coffee beans, when faced with the obstacle of boiling water, changed the water itself. The moral here is when faced with an obstacle such as anger, how do you respond? Are you hard and strong, but the anger makes you soft and weak? Are you soft inside, but the anger makes you hard inside, like hard-hearted? Or when you are faced with the obstacle of anger, you have the strength within to overtake the anger and change everything about it. Instead of the anger altering you, you alter the anger. That's a deep thing, but we can have that. With step 4, we begin this journey, the transformation of changing the obstacle itself instead of it changing you. Next week, we will discuss fear. I'm going to stop recording.